Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking a look at someone you might know as the drummer for My Chemical Romance, Bob Bryar. But as we go through his Wikipedia page, you'll see it's anything but a typical rock and roll story.
Yeah, there are definitely some unexpected twists and turns along the way.
A lot of resilience, too.
Oh, absolutely. And a surprising passion that runs through it all, animal rescue.
So let's jump right in, shall we? Where do we even begin with a life like this?
Well, I think the most interesting part for me, at least, is how he got to be the drummer for My Chemical Romance in the first place. It wasn't the typical, start drumming as a kid, dreamed of being a rock star kind of story.
Right, he didn't start with a drum kit. He was a sound engineer.
Exactly. I mean, talk about a different path to rock stardom.
So he was working behind the scenes, making other bands sound amazing.
Yeah, working with groups like The Used and Thrice, capturing the perfect sound, that was his thing.
Wow, so how does someone go from sound engineer to drummer for a band like My Chemical Romance?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. It all started with a tour. My Chemical Romance and The Used were actually touring together.
Oh, wow, so Bryar was already connected to them.
Yeah, he was working as a sound engineer for The Used at the time.
And that's how he met the guys from My Chemical Romance.
Exactly. So he was friends with them before he was even in the band.
And then, their drummer just quit out of the blue?
Well, not exactly out of the blue, but pretty close. Their drummer at the time left shortly after 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge came out.
That's a huge album for them.
Huge, and right when they're about to really take off.
So they needed a new drummer fast.
Exactly.
And Bryar just happened to be right there.
It's almost like fate, isn't it?
Talk about being in the right place at the right time.
Totally. And he obviously had the skills, even if he wasn't a drummer by trade.
I'm curious, though, do we know anything about how his sound engineering background might have influenced his drumming?
That's a really good question. I mean, think about the sound of My Chemical Romance, especially on the Black Parade.
It's so layered and dramatic. So many sonic textures.
Exactly. I bet his experience with sound engineering definitely played a role in shaping that.
It would be fascinating to know how he approached drumming from that perspective. Did he think about things differently than a traditional drummer might?
I'd love to know, too. Maybe he had a different ear for the nuances of sound, the way different elements come together.
It's like he brought this whole other layer of expertise to the band.
Totally.
And the Black Parade was such a pivotal moment for them.
It really launched them into superstardom, didn't it?
And Bryar was right there in the thick of it.
Absolutely. Contributing to this iconic album, playing these huge shows.
It wasn't all smooth sailing, though, was it?
No, not at all. I mean, the famous Last Words video, that was intense.
Oh my God, yes, I remember hearing about that. Both Bryar and Gerard Way were injured during filming, right?
Yeah, it was crazy.
Talk about dedication to your art.
Way needed stitches in his leg after that.
But Bryar's injuries were even worse, weren't they?
3rd-degree burns, can you believe it? That's horrifying. How did that even happen?
I think something went wrong with the pyrotechnic effect. It's amazing they were able to finish filming it all.
It makes you wonder if that experience had a lasting impact on him,
Both physically and maybe even mentally.
It must have been traumatic.
And then he started having problems with his wrists. Even needed surgery at one point.
Ouch. I can't even imagine.
It's one thing to be a drummer constantly using your wrists, but then to have an injury on top of that.
It must have been so frustrating, especially with the band being at the height of their popularity.
It must have been incredibly difficult for him to step back from touring.
And then, in 2010, right before Danger Days came out, he left the band.
Yeah, it was pretty sudden.
Especially considering how successful they were at the time.
It definitely caught a lot of people off guard. But the thing is, even though he wasn't on Danger Days, he still had writing credits on some of the tracks.
Really?
Yeah, and his drumming is actually on Conventional Weapons, because that was recorded before he left.
Oh, interesting. So it wasn't a clean break. Not exactly. It's more like his presence is still there, even after he left.
Like a fading echo.
I like that, a fading echo.
But he didn't disappear from music altogether, did he?
Not right away. He did some behind-the-scenes work for other bands for a while.
So he was still involved in the industry, just in a different way.
Yeah, but then he made a pretty drastic change.
What do you mean?
He went into real estate.
Really? That's quite a shift. From rock and roll to real estate.
I don't know. It's not what you'd expect.
It makes you wonder what prompted that change.
Maybe he was just looking for something completely different.
A new challenge.
Maybe he felt like he'd accomplished everything he wanted to in the music world.
It's interesting how someone can have such a diverse career.
And through all of these changes, there's this one constant thread:
What's that?
his passion for animal rescue.
Oh, right. I remember reading about that.
He was really dedicated to it, even auctioned off some of his My Chemical Romance memorabilia to raise money.
What? Like what?
His Helena-themed drum kit, the uniform he wore during the Black Parade era.
That's incredible.
It really shows how deeply he cared about this cause.
It's like he channeled that same energy he had for music into something completely different.
But equally important to him.
So we've got this guy who goes from sound engineer to rock star drummer to real estate agent, all while being a passionate animal advocate.
It's not your average story, that's for sure.
It makes you realize there's always more to people than meets the eye.
Absolutely. There's always more to discover.
And we're just getting started with Bob Bryar's story.
I can't wait to see what else we uncover.
Me too. So we left off talking about Bryar's passion for animal rescue.
It's really remarkable how much he dedicated himself to this cause.
Makes you think, what was it that sparked that passion?
Right. Was there some specific event, or did it just grow over time?
Yeah, I'm curious to see if his Wikipedia page mentions anything about that.
Me too.
We know he was really involved with animal shelters, especially after Hurricane Ian.
Remember how he auctioned off some of his My Chemical Romance stuff?
Yeah, his Helena-themed drum kit, his uniform from the Black Parade.
All to help those shelters.
That's incredible.
He wasn't just donating money, he was really trying to make a difference.
It's like he took all that energy, all that passion he had for music, and channeled it into something else.
Something totally different, but just as important to him.
It's not an easy thing to do, to go from being in a rock band to working in animal rescue.
It takes a certain kind of person,
Someone who's not afraid of change.
willing to step outside their comfort zone.
It's easy to get stuck in one thing, one identity.
Like, oh, he's the drummer for My Chemical Romance, that's who he is.
Right, but Bryar was so much more than that.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a good reminder for all of us,
That we don't have to be defined by just one thing.
We can have multiple passions, multiple sides to ourselves.
And it's okay to explore those different sides, even if they seem completely different.
It's all part of who we are.
So, speaking of exploring different sides, there was this interview Bryar did in 2016.
Oh yeah, with Alternative Press, right?
That's the one.
His first interview since leaving My Chemical Romance.
And it was all about the Black Parade.
Interesting. So even though he'd moved on from the band, he was still willing to talk about that era.
It seems like he could look back on it with fondness.
Maybe some perspective too,
Yeah, like being able to see it from a distance.
Appreciate its impact, both on his life and on the fans.
It's not always easy to do that, to revisit something so personal.
Especially after you've moved on to something completely different.
But it's cool that he was able to do that.
Makes me want to go back and listen to the Black Parade again.
Me too.
With this new understanding of Bryar's journey.
Like it adds another layer to the music.
Like knowing the backstory of the artist makes you appreciate the art even more.
Absolutely.
It's a reminder that music, like any art form, is a reflection of the artist's experiences.
And knowing those experiences can change how we hear the music.
So, on a more somber note, we have to talk about Bryar's passing.
Yeah, it was really shocking news.
In November 2024, he was only 44.
Way too young.
And the cause of death still hasn't been released.
Adds another layer of mystery to this already complex story.
It's a reminder that even those who seem larger than life are still human.
We never know what someone might be going through.
Makes you want to cherish the moments we do have,
Celebrate the things they gave to the world.
The music, the activism, the impact they had on others.
It's easy to get caught up in the headlines, the public persona.
But in the end, it's the human connection that matters.
The legacy of kindness, passion, resilience.
Those are the things that stay with us.
So as we reflect on Bob Bryar's life, what stands out to you the most?
For me, it's his willingness to change, to reinvent himself.
He didn't let any one thing define him.
He was a sound engineer, a rock star, a real estate agent, an animal advocate.
He was all of those things and more.
And he embraced each chapter of his life fully.
It's inspiring,
It shows us that we're capable of so much more than we think.
We can evolve, we can grow, we can make a difference.
And it's never too late to start. It's
Yeah.
like he was constantly pushing the boundaries, like, what can I do next?
Right. And never letting anyone put him in a box.
It's a good lesson for all of us, I think.
Oh, totally. To not be afraid to try new things, even if they seem scary.
I know, I get stuck in my routine sometime.
Me too. It's easy to get comfortable.
But Bryar's story shows that real growth comes from pushing ourselves outside of that comfort zone.
And, it's not just about personal growth,
Right, his work with animal rescue shows how those passions can have a real impact on the world.
especially after Hurricane Ian. He really stepped up to help those
It
shelters.
makes you think about your own legacy. You know,
What do we want to be remembered for?
it's a big question.
It is, but in Bryar's case, it's clear that his legacy goes beyond just the music.
He was a talented musician, no doubt.
Absolutely, but he was also so much more than that.
A compassionate advocate for animals.
And it's interesting how those two sides of him, the rock star and the animal lover, seem connected somehow.
Yeah, like the same intensity and passion that he brought to the stage, he also brought to his activism.
It's like those different parts of ourselves, the things we're passionate about, they're all connected somehow.
Maybe that's what makes us whole,
Embracing all those different facets, not trying to fit into one neat little box.
I like that. It's a good takeaway from Bryar's story.
And maybe the most important one, to live authentically, pursue your passions, and make a difference.
Couldn't said it better myself. So, for our listeners who are feeling inspired by Bob Bryar's journey, what would you suggest they do?
Well, first of all, listen to the music.
Yeah, dive into My Chemical Romances albums, especially the ones Bryar played on.
The Black Parade, Conventional Weapons, really hear his drumming, the energy he brought to the band.
And if you're feeling inspired by his animal rescue work,
Look for local organizations in your area, see if there's a way you can get involved.
even small actions can make a difference.
Volunteering and donating, spreading awareness, it all helps.
Who knows, maybe Bryar's story will spark a new passion in someone listening.
That would be amazing.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the life of Bob Bryar, what's one final thought we can leave our listeners with?
Remember that life is full of unexpected turns, just like Bryar's story.
Embrace change, pursue your passions, and never underestimate the impact you can have on the world.
Well said.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a new and fascinating topic. Until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep making a difference.